After 6, like we started, to respect everybody's time tonight. My name is Dave Mullen. I am the Director of Communications for the Northwest Indiana Regional Development Authority. I'd like to thank you all for coming tonight. We're really looking forward to hearing what you think of the draft boundary for the Dune Park Transit Development District. For those of you that don't know a lot about the RDA, we were put together by the legislature back in 2006 with the goal of funding major infrastructure projects in the region, specifically in Lake and Porter counties. We're funded by mostly casino dollars from Gary, Amity, Chicago, and Lake County, and then some economic development tax money from Porter County. And over the last 15 years, we've done projects including helping to extend the runway at the Gary Airport, a bunch of projects on the shoreline, including the Lakefront Riverwalk up in Portage. And we're now currently funding a big part of the West Lake and double tracking commuter rail expansion projects. As part of that, we have been asked by the legislature to create what are called these transit development districts around each station area, both on West Lake and double track. And the idea behind these is to accelerate the development that we believe that the rail projects are going to bring to the region. And they're also an opportunity for each community to kind of create some fences and boundaries in terms of development, where they would like it to go, and then we can have a further discussion about what kind of development they'd like to see. It's important to note that tonight we're talking primarily about the boundaries. Nobody's planning any kind of development. What happens within the districts will be up to the local communities. It's important to note that the RDA doesn't have zoning or permitting authority within these districts. Any development that does happen there will have to go through all the normal processes that any development in the town of Porter would have to go through. So it has to be a collaborative process. The benefit is that within the districts, the RDA can act to fund infrastructure improvements and development incentives, so that the town doesn't have to use its money on that. Anyhow, I'm joined here tonight by Aaron Kowalski from MKSK. They're an urban planning firm out of Indianapolis. They've been instrumental in helping us draw all these boundaries, as well as Dave Reynolds from Policy Analytics. They are a financial consultant, and if anyone has any kind of questions related to how finances work or TIF districts and all that kind of stuff, he is the man. So without further ado, Aaron,
great.
Over to you.
Thanks everyone for coming. It's a good turnout. Really appreciate it. We're going to keep this moving along. We're happy to stay afterwards, take questions around the boards, and we'll do a formal Q&A at the end of the presentation as well. But if any time something doesn't make sense, just raise your hand, ask a question. So Dave gave a good primer on why we're here to talk with you today, and we really appreciate this opportunity. The Dune Park Station is kind of in an unusual area in that it's completely surrounded by national park, as well as US 12. So, this was, I would say, one of the trickier boundaries to figure out, but thankfully we had really good guidance, continue to have good guidance from Michael Berry and his team. So we started working with the town of Porter actually when COVID was just starting, and through that process learned that the town was doing a comprehensive plan update. We wanted to let that process play out so that we could really learn from the comprehensive plan, because this is really a tool for us to help elevate what the community wants through that process and through this economic development tool. So in general, the part of Porter we're looking at is around, basically from old splashdown dunes all the way to Tremont Road, kind of that area along US 20, connecting down Tremont to the Nippy Station, kind of the edge of the state national parks, and really looking at ways to activate some of those areas that were called out as places that the town would like to develop over time, both for the benefit of the community and to harness some of the economic development dollars that are happening around the state and national park. So Dave had mentioned that we've been working with a lot of communities regionally. For the last several years, we also have a steering committee, so you can see those names up there on the screen, pretty much all the way from South Bend to Hammond, and then Hammond all the way down to Dyer on the West Lake line. So we've been working with all the communities in the region, including the town of Porter. And the Regional Development Authority is also in partnership with NICD, the transit operator, who is also a party in helping fund the transit project. So the role of the RDA, so we are leading this economic development project. We control the steering committee, we work with that committee, report out to them quarterly. And really we're here to provide policy and planning guidance to the communities. So what that means is we meet with you in groups like this to understand, did we get the boundary right? Are there things that we need to change? Are there sites that we haven't considered? And then really, once the boundary is established in kind of its final format, we'll still be available to work with the town, with Michael and other elected and appointed officials as projects may come to the table, help out those projects. RDA has a deep bench of planning and economic development consultants that can be a resource to the town as projects may come to the table in the future. And so, you know, the catalyst for the double track and the Westlake Line's modernization of, you know, the 100-plus-year-old South Shore rail system. And really it's allowing for Northwest Indiana in another way to be much more competitive with the Chicagoland region in Illinois, where the Metro Rail has, you know, a lot of different lines. And really this is the state's way of investing back in Northwest Indiana and then creating an economic development tool along with that infrastructure to really harness the potential for the $2.3 billion in investment that's been measured that we believe over the next 20 years regionally will come out of the fact that there's been investments in the rail. And so what that means is communities all along the double track, which you see here, are going to benefit from economic development, but economic development is different in each community. Michigan City has different goals and different aspirations as a community than Porter. So this is really a way of harnessing opportunities locally. As we look at some of the Chicagoland communities in Illinois, the communities that have invested in kind of strategic economic development close by to the stations or within a walkable distance of stations, or in the case of Dune Park, a little bit further out from the stations, you know, they've seen significant new construction, population growth, and real estate changes. So why we're here today to talk with you all. So we're going to give some basics on what a transit development district boundary is, how it's special to Northwest Indiana. It's special legislation for this region. What's the process we're working through? How did we arrive at some of the suggestions that we have for this boundary? And then we'll talk a little bit more about the boundary. Another thing I want to point you to, and I saw a lot of people taking pictures of this, their website, nwitd.com. We have a tab for Dune Park, Town of Porter. We will keep you apprised as we get through this process. We'll have recordings of this meeting, as well as slide decks from this meeting, the boards from this meeting, and then any other subsequent meeting. We've got RDA board hearings that would then happen a little later in the fall, and we'll have recordings of those as well. So that's the way that we can keep you all apprised of the process, especially for those that maybe can't make an in-person meeting. It'll be available recorded on YouTube. The town can share it on their social media. The RDA will share it on their social media. So what should you know about transit development districts? Main focus here is promoting transit-oriented development, or in the case of kind of, you know, Porter here, since it's a little bit unique, providing those strategic links to the station and to the economic drivers around the station. And so this is a tool to achieve the economic development goals of the community. And this boundary is calibrated specifically for each community's needs based on analysis and opportunities that we've worked closely with Michael Berry and his team on. So this is not just a boundary. It really is a way that we want to complement the economic growth path of the community, and that's why waiting until the comprehensive plan is done is so important. A TDD is a half-mile or 320 acres special economic development district approved by the state. So in addition to getting a letter of support from the town, the RDA board support, and through resolution, we also have to take it downstate and make a pitch to the state budget committee downstate to say, you know, we've gone through all this process, we've got the support, this is the boundary, let's establish it. And we hope to do that yet this year. it's likely that, if we get through this meeting, get through any changes we need to make to the boundary and then get through the RDA board meetings, which last year we took 7 boundaries through the RDA board and got them passed unanimously. So we've had good success and track records in the past. We've done our due diligence, we'll continue to do our due diligence. So that's the process that we're going through. And this is really an effort to revitalize and realize economic development in these communities. And it's formed by a very in-depth and technical analysis process. The boards and the information we'll present today are supported by a deep bench of technical analysis that our team has done. TDD is not zoning comprehensive planning. This is not anything that is going to result in property takings, eminent domain. This is not a partnership with a specific developer or realtor. Although we want realtors and developers to be paying attention to the fact that there is another tool in the community's toolbox to help support development. And this is not directly affiliated with the rail project. So while we're happy to take questions that you might have, we don't work for NICD, so we can't answer them directly, but we'd be happy to pass them. So transit development boundaries are contiguous, so they're connected. But as you see up on those boards, they can be kind of an irregular shape. And so similar to a TIP district, they can be drawn connected with roads or right of way. And so the idea there is we want to strategically identify the areas that are most likely to have a positive economic development impact to capture those in this boundary. And as a reminder, so state statute, this is a little different than a TIP district, caps it at a half square mile or 320 acres of area. This is an example from Gary of that of an irregular boundary. It's not an actual boundary. Transit development districts capture the incremental growth of local increment property tax revenue for use and investment back in the district. So any dollars collected in this district will be spent back in this district. They won't be spent somewhere else. And the RDA will be working with the town on an MOA to control exactly how that money gets funneled back into the community to support projects. So reinforcing revenue collected from the district is spent in the district, and the community retains land use and zoning control. Very important. You'll notice on the map over there, we've got something we'll bring up on the screen as well, that some of this area does have an existing TIP district. I mentioned the MOA, the memorandum that is going to be come into agreement between the town and the RDA. That will protect the existing increment that is funneled within that TIP district. Any outstanding bonds or debt will not be negatively impacted. The TDD will overlay on top and will collect property tax as well as incremental income tax. And really this allows for an additional tool for the town to use. As Dave mentioned, there's potential in the future also for economic development incentives, grants, potential bonding through the state that could be part of this process as well. So I mentioned this meeting, this is the first step after working with the town for quite a while. We did have an informational briefing to the council late last month. And so after consultation with these communities, we have to have 2 public hearings before the RDA board. This is a public meeting, this is not a public hearing, but we are recording it. And then we'll go to the state budget committee downstate. So we mentioned MOU, how will MOU take place? So this functions like a developer agreement in the negotiations between a municipality and a project developer as investment is taking place. So essentially this will be within the RDA and the community, and we'll talk about how projects are funded, how money is funneled back to the community through the RDA, and how that collaboration works. And it's going to be different for each community, but it'll be agreed upon for both. So how we arrive at the study area and boundary. So we've done a lot of what I call quantitative and qualitative analysis. So we've done stationary mapping, we've done a lot of research, we've done some market research, we've been around this community for a while working with Michael and his team for some time now. And we're having conversations like this, workshops like this with your council, to capture input, answer questions, get people familiar. So then we're in a place right now where we've drafted the boundary and we've got a lot of work that's backed that up. After this meeting, depending on comments we get or comments that we subsequently get from the town and from the council, we can make further edits to the boundary all the way up to the RDA's second board hearing, which will be likely in October of this year. So analysis, quantitative, qualitative, area specific. So we're taking a lot of data as well as information that we've learned from boots on the ground, people like Michael, who know the market, know the community, know not only the types of development that are happening today, but what are some of the barriers to the types of development that the town would like to see in the future. And so things that we look at: acreage, ownership, vacancy status, current use, with what the comprehensive plan recommends, zoning, access, walkability, proximity to the station, different conditions, if it's in a TIF district, what does that impact from a community perspective? And really the goal here is to strengthen, preserve, infill, and redevelop areas and provide another tool for areas that might be difficult to develop. As part of this, we've also looked at kind of at a high level at infrastructure constraints in the area. We have provided some information to Michael and his team about infrastructure that may be required to get to the kind of development that you all want here. So goals, unique qualities, current conditions. I mentioned the comp plan, understanding kind of the area that we're studying. So this isn't the whole town, but kind of the area within that general study area, and really understanding the economic development goals that are in the comp plan to enhance the value of the recreational setting using the guide development, plan for capital infrastructure improvements, support favorable development along key corridors with different kinds of housing or development in this area, develop creative strategies for parcels with highest potential for community good, and develop possibilities for the use of this funding in a way that is positive in the district. This is the map from the comprehensive plan, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here, but we paid very close attention to this and the boundary that we drafted and the recommendations that we started working on for the summary support that of the land uses that are shown in the comprehensive plan. So these are kind of hard to read, but examples of all the different kinds of mapping we went through, everything from ownership to walkability to floodplain to where rights of way are, where national park land is versus other land. And so that's gotten us to the station and the draft boundary. Just to orient everyone here, just pretty easiest map. So Tremont Road, that comes in here. We've got 4994, that interchange, Waverly Road comes up here. And then we kind of connect up here on 49 in State Park. This is where Waverly connects up to the old Dune Beach Inn. And then, and so in general, the area that we've captured is kind of an awkward shape, I would say, but really focuses in on some of the areas that are undeveloped today within the town, and that there's been a desire to try to get development activated at. We've also worked with the town and understood that there's some trail infrastructure today, there's some trail infrastructure that is desired in the future. So we've tried to capture some of those areas where trail infrastructure may be required or desired in the future within this boundary. So that could be a potential use for it. Within this boundary today, we are focused solely on the town of Porter. The station is in the town of Porter, and so by statute, we go with the nearest community, and that's where we devise the boundary. You can see in green where Chesterton and kind of the purple Dune Acres and then Portage. So this boundary is wholly within the town of Porter today. We avoid any property that is either state or national park. That property is not developable and often is sensitive environmentally. So we've avoided those areas. I want to reinforce that we're not developing within the park. We also looked at floodplain, wetland areas, and to the best extent possible, we've tried to avoid some of those areas where there might be some wetland or floodplain extents. There could be mitigation, or those areas could just be left as naturalized areas as development occurs. And it's likely development that we would recommend here would be called conservation type development, so low impact development that has lots of open space and enhances the natural areas. Anchors, we've looked at visitor center, some of the parks in the community, the national park, the state park. And what we began to understand also is, a lot of the commercial and is in Chesterton or it's kind of on the periphery. And so in talking with state and national park officials, there really is a desire to get more amenities closer to the park. And so there's a real opportunity there. We've also talked with the town and reviewed the comprehensive plan to understand that residents in the community would also like more of those amenities. We've avoided residential areas by and large part. One thing to note that is with the TDD boundary, it's kind of like a TIF district. So if you have single family residential housing, you don't capture the increment. So we really are looking for areas that either would redevelop or areas that would have, commercial development or hotel development or other kinds of development of that sort. We've looked at vacant land, publicly owned land, and land that's otherwise underutilized. It's trying to understand this process as well. And so we've arrived at a boundary. I'll put a cleaned up version here. So this is kind of the big interchange at US 20 and Indiana 49. This is the area where the former Splashdown Dunes was, and across the street, kind of the area where Home and Flooring, Leeds Animal Hospital is, petroleum company, and then some of the larger properties down between Waverly and Wagner, up Tremont, the area around the former Andershot site, the area that's planned for the RV park, and some of the properties across the street. So that's what we've included in this boundary. I should mention that by statute, the town, after this boundary is established, can go back to the RDA once between now and 2047 and say we want an enlarged boundary. Totally dependent on the town. Likely would come from the town manager and the council. Come to the RDA and say, hey, we want to expand the boundary. We have an idea of other areas where we'd like to generate, and create this boundary to generate economic development. It may be this downtown area, it may be other places in the community. So you can expand the boundary once up to 1 square mile or 640 acres, you can double the size of the boundary. It has the same benefits, the same process. So we start small and really respect, the areas that the town has identified through their comprehensive planning that they see opportunities for the biggest investment and that in the future it can be expanded. As I mentioned, there is some interaction with the TIF district. So, there are some areas that are already in a TIF. We'll work closely with the town as the boundary is established to mitigate any impacts. And as I mentioned, there's that MLA process that will deal with that as well. So the kind of development we see in these areas, it's walkable development. It's things that are community focused, different kinds of housing, maybe restaurants, coffee shops, maybe opportunity for a hotel. Definitely supporting also things like, we've already kind of tourism-based park that the town has supported in the past. Maybe there's opportunities for food and beverage type options that could be co-located around the visitor center and some of those other areas as well. So that's really the kind of growth that we are paying attention to the town understanding may happen in this area. And so that's really, kind of where we're headed. As I mentioned, we've got the website and in the next steps, we've got all this information here. So we're going to turn lights back on, be around this forest and have conversations. We've got the website. We're going to be working over the next couple of weeks to gather feedback both from this meeting and outside of this meeting from council or other officials. And the RDA will have the board meetings and we'll go to the state budget committee. And we feel like it's been a pretty good process. The town is wonderful to work with here. And I really appreciate you all coming out. And I'd be happy to open up for questions formally or we can gather around the boards. And I can go back to things slides if you'd like as well. Please.
I have one question. When you have your public hearings, the RDA, is that going to be held locally here or is that going to be held in an RDA facility someplace else?
It'll be held at the RDA headquarters in Crown Point. But
so we have to go to Crown Point for the public hearing.
That's correct. We will record those though, and make them available online, for anyone who wants.
So do they
to
do
send that.
Zoom with those? So that
Yes,
you
there
can-
will be a Zoom component, so you'll be able to log in and make a comment. if you-
And then they'll be recorded and put on the RDA's YouTube page.
Yep.
typically, Yeah, and Facebook page. Please,
Yeah, I got a couple of questions. How long does the TDD last?
it'll expire in 2047.
24/7. And then any changes in the boundaries that you have set so far have to be done by next month? So we submit it to the downstate?
That's what we are aiming for. There is not a statutory requirement that that happens in that fashion, but that's the process we'll turn on.
Does your new district overlay on the existing Porter TIF district, or does it surround?
They'll overlay, they'll lay on top, so the two will work together. And the money that's captured, the additional dollars will then get funneled back to the community.
And then if, Porter wants to do more TIF districts in any of this area, are they restricted in any way?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, once the TDD is established, if there's not a TIF, a community cannot put a TIF on top of the TDD.
But the money gets funneled back to the town.
Who can request to expand in TDD?
Our
Are they town quarter or
community town, yeah.
any other community that's expanding? Yes,
David,
for example, we're close, Chester fairly close. Do they?
Yeah, I mean, I would think it would just be an ongoing discussion between the town of Chesterton and the town of Porter for
Or do they
expansion.
illegal?
so for instance, if both municipalities came to the RDA and said, hey, we talked about it and we wanna expand part of the boundary up to 640 and Porter, and we wanna expand part of it up into Chesterton, that, I think that would be okay, right?
I mean, we have one other TDD that has two cities?
Two.
Two.
Munster and Dyer, because the train station physically is on Main Street, which is straddling the line, and then, Portage and Ogden Dunes, because the train station straddles both community lines.
Well, I can understand what the TDD originally incorporates more than one municipality. But in this case, it was so important, in this TDD, my question is whether or not Chester, but it had stayed in the county, that's what we expand. If it was expanded, then the money would be funneled now back in Porter.
No, the way that we set it up, is whichever locality that piece of the district is in, those dollars would go back to that community. So like in the Munster Dyer, it was about 60-40 something, I forget. But the Munster, the revenues from Munster stay in Munster, and the revenues from Dyer stay in Dyer. Statute requires that the RDA have separate accounts for each TDD and for each community.
So that in the scenario that Chesterton would come and ask to expand this TDD, Porter would never lose any money. None of that money, if they did expand it, Porter would always capture.
Right.
Money. Thank you.
Hi, you're saying that the TDD would overlap the TIF district. Does that mean that some of the money that's going to the TIF district now would end up being collected by the TDD?
No, it would be new increment on top, so the existing TIF district would collect what it collects today, and then anything over the top, either property or incremental income tax, would be funneled into that new account for reinvestment.
Okay, does that mean the taxes would go up?
No.
So if the TIF district is already collecting a certain amount, the TDD would only collect what the TIF district does not collect today?
It would collect the new increment, so it would collect as development occurs, that new increment on top of the increment. As property values increase, to funnel back into the district, and then on the incremental income tax side, that's money that currently goes downstate and does not come back to the community, and it will come back to the community, so that's
Okay.
an additional benefit.
So TIF, the money, there's gonna be no extra money for going forward for the TIF district if this is approved. It'll only be what is set then, and then any other increases will go to the TDD, right?
The dollars will go to the TDD and then get funneled back to the town board.
Okay, but are there, so does the TDD, basically, does it restrict what goes on in that TDD district?
The,
Do you restrict what kind of developments and what kind of things go on?
No.
No,
no, the town would maintain land use and zoning control.
so that would go to the redevelopment commission and still maintain what to do with the money?
The town would go to the RDA and say, hey, we have this project we want to fund. There's gonna be an MOA that sets up that process.
Okay.
Everybody's gonna agree on that process and the project gets funded.
Okay, so the RDA would have to approve anything that goes on in that TD district, including the TIF district issues?
David, I don't know if it's the RDC or.
RDC, what is it?
It would be, the RDA would only have final say on the TDD dollars that are being distributed back. If there's an existing TIF there and there's existing TIF projects that are happening, the RDA has no say.
Okay, but what if the
I thought
redevelopment
it was this
commission,
way to talk.
what if the redevelopment commission wants to start a new project once this is approved? Do they have to go get outside approval for the project?
Only if they would want TDD dollars as part of that
Okay.
project.
So if it's their dollars, they don't have to get any kind of approval from you guys? Okay, thank you.
Other questions?
Yeah, actually, two. One is, does this have to be contiguous? I mean, can you have this half acre here and put a half acre over there?
It needs to be connected by a road.
It has to be connected.
An easement, yes.
Or an easement, okay. And second question I have is real quick. You don't do any traffic studies or anything. That's a town. When the developments start coming in would be their responsibility or,
Well,
because that is a state road running kind of right.
yeah, I mean, I think NDOT regularly does traffic studies and counts. And then NERC, the Metropolitan Planning Organization and Portage, they do that on a regular basis as well. So my understanding is the town and the RDA would, when development starts to occur, work with a group like NERC and they can update their model. And they do that on a regular basis.
You're talking about walkability. I'm not sure what that means in this context because I can't see any passengers on the South Shore walking these long roads to get to a certain area where there's nothing that really would attract them possibly. I guess I'm trying to understand the concept.
It is, you are a little bit further away in this area than from the other stations, just due to the nature of the state and national park occupying the property where the station is today. We believe that there may be opportunities in the future to work with visitor center and other entities, maybe for a shuttle. There's so much congestion at the state park and at the beachfront right now. As you look at other state national parks throughout the country, oftentimes you have a parking lot and then, you know, they have a cap on how many cars can come into the actual facility, and then they've got a shuttle that bring people from another place or lot. And so as we think about some of these areas that could be co-located with a hotel or restaurants or other things, that could be positive for the community. And so we would want to make sure those areas are walkable, and we would recommend, but, you know, can't require, of course, you know, that a shuttle bus. And we've been talking with the State National Park about that as well. I know they started something like that before COVID. I don't know if they have plans to bring it back, but, you know, we know that it's in the this area. Does that help?
Yeah.
And we're also talking about walkability within the area of the development, not just walkability to the station. So
Because-
it could be the development.
Similar to a TIF, the TDD could fund things like sidewalks and trails. So if you think about Tremont Road, for instance, if that area develops at some point in the future where the old Andershocks was and those other areas, we would want those to be linked up to the town's trail system. We would want those to have sidewalks, safe crossings, and things like that. And the TDD can help fund some of those things.
Said, don't think of that as incremental increases. So that's gonna, in effect, result in loss of tax revenues to the town.
No, because the money's gonna get funneled back to the town through the TDD, and there'll be the additional source of revenue through the incremental tax.
So it won't result in a net loss for our schools or anything like that,
If so,
incrementally.
No.
We sorry, no.
David,
No, I don't think so. I mean, if you're talking a percentage increase, that means that percentage, if we took the development, we're gonna need more, and that means our schools would be getting a lesser percent. But not necessarily. I mean, because the, your schools are generally funded by the state on the operating, on the education side, the state. On the operation side. It's a levy-driven system, so the state already has a control over how much they can raise with a max levy on their operations. As AD goes up, okay, tax rates go down. They're still setting that same levy, and so that what will occur in most cases is there'll be a circuit breaker state. And so what will happen is as the AD goes up, there'll be less circuit breaker that the school moves. That's how that plays out. Because of the development, the increase in the AD will reduce circuit breaker, which will add revenue.
When does the current TIF district expire in the town quarter?
I'm not sure I know that answer.
And if the town were to want to extend the life of that TIF district, would they be restricted in doing that if the TDD is established? I know you said you couldn't, or the town can't create a new one.
if the TIF sunsets in
Right.
2025.
Yeah, but you have the ability to extend your TIF now? I'm not sure that you do,
Possible.
whether the
I can't
TDD, I guess
really
that's,
answer that, but
yeah, I don't think the town has the ability to extend their TIF
okay.
under current statute, right now. I mean, we believe that by having that TDD is essentially extending the life of your TIF. Because now the increment that the TIF is capturing would drop away when the TIF expires, but you've got now the TDD on top of it, which goes till 2047.
And if the town were to want to grant, say, tax abatement to a business that would come into the TDD district, would they be restricted in doing that?
It doesn't have, no, it's all rest with the town. All those decisions still rest.
I was just wondering how aggressively, excuse me, are you gonna market this TDD once it's established? Is it gonna sit there and wait for people to come to it, for the town to do the marketing?
I would tell you that the development community is already paying attention. Places like Michigan City and Hammond, Munster, Portage, developers are knocking on the door because they want to take advantage of any incentive they can get to make a development feasible. And so, in addition to that, the RDA has, through these processes, had what are called industry days at the desire of the local community, where we essentially bring in folks from the local development community and regional and state development communities, and even in Chicago, to the table, inform them about the process, give them the contacts for the town. A lot of times also as developers approach the town, they'll call the RDA and say, hey, can we meet with David and Aaron, and can we have them vet our development concepts or ideas? And so we've also provided a lot of that technical assistance to help communities that may not have that expertise in-house. David, is there anything you want to add to that? Questions, comments?
The question, looking at the map, it looks like our downtown area along Lincoln Street is not included. Is there any thought or debate on why that would be, in order to provide funds to upgrade and enhance and develop the existing downtown area?
We would be, if the council and town manager wanted us to include the downtown area, we are not at 320 acres yet. We want to stay a couple acres away from 320. So if that is a desire of the community, we'd be happy to bring that forward.
Well, Amtrak runs right through here too, so would that be sort of a plus?
Potentially, I mean, there's not a station here.
Right.
But,
It's a big one.
we love that.
Can we use your money for that?
I think to follow up on Mr. Burgess' question about whether or not the downtown area was on the table at any point, and you decided to take it off the table, is that what, or was it just not discussed?
It was discussed, and I think it just didn't bubble up to the top of the surface. I think at the time, I think the thought process was, if we expand the boundary, maybe that's an area we expand it into.
Gotcha.
But if that's a desire of town leadership, we are happy to consider that and see if we can get that. So it'll be up to you all.
I would like to hear the pros and cons of prioritizing already developed areas versus these underdeveloped areas, which are clearly the bulk of this TDD map. They're underdeveloped areas. I know that it will be that by establishing this TDD, we will attract developers. So is there a list of pros and cons that shifts towards prioritizing the underdeveloped versus?
I mean, I would say that your assessed value of like a downtown area like this, notwithstanding major, investment in properties, that AV is not going to go up a ton. So you're not going to get a ton of new increment in places like some of those properties along Tremont that are totally undeveloped. If you develop those, likely number one, there's no tip debt on it today. And then also, you're going to need infrastructure upgrades and things like that the TDD can help benefit through, extra ways of funding. And every dollar helps. And then the ability to capture more increment is higher. Your ceiling is higher in areas that have a really low AV. And so that's kind of the pro, I would say, of focusing on undeveloped areas. If you feel that, as part of your downtown strategy, economic development strategy, that you want to try to attract much more development down here. I know there's some lots that could be filled in, for instance. Then I think we're happy to do whatever we want to do.
Does this affect our fire or police in any way? I mean, can we use your money for, if we develop all this, we're gonna need more police officers and more fire people and so on and so forth. I'm looking at down the way here, because if all this is developed, is that a town thing, or would you guys, would this money possibly be able to be used for additional police and fire?
Just like TIP dollars, TDD dollars cannot be used for operating expenses. It can only be used for infrastructure. The advantage that the town would get from development is kind of the same discussion I was having with the schools. I mean, it's bringing additional development, additional AV into the community, which then supports the current max levy that the town has in support of those for the fire and the police, reduces circuit breaker. So the idea is the development will drive more revenue to the town as well. But you cannot use TDD dollars for.
I guess I'm just concerned because our police and our fire are so stretched already with Dune State Park and everything else going on. And they're pretty much traffic control on the weekends.
Lord?
So as a commercial real estate agent, so I'm obviously I'm just trying to connect the dots here. So what you're offering is financial help in improving those areas because they're obviously underdeveloped because it's lacking a lot of infrastructure. So that's what you're suggesting. This is what's going to help bridge the gap.
Yeah.
Through the RDA.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, because nobody asked, what was the analysis
the downtown, but also the Brickyard property.
Yeah, the Brickyard property, we did not do any in-depth analysis on. We're happy to, if that's something that kind of wants, that really didn't come up in our conversations. We were really focused on, the areas, kind of a little bit closer to the station. But if that's an area you'd like to see.
I was just to say, as a commercial real estate agent, I would love to know more about the Brickyard and what could be done there.
These are good, this is good feedback, and that's why we have these meetings, we hear things like this, and I will tell you, in all the other meetings we've done, we've added some sites or removed some sites, so this kind of feedback is helpful for us. Our next step is to get together with, likely, you know, some members of, well, Michael Berry, the members of the Redevelopment Commission and the council, and hammer out these changes. Like I said, we'll be making edits to this boundary clear through to the second RDA board hearing. So this is the kind of feedback we need to hear.
I don't have a specific answer. I don't serve on RDC, but I was at one of their more recent meetings, and just a quick update for the Brickyard. RDC is moving forward with soil samples so that they can rehabilitate that property so that it can be sold and developed.
Excellent. So it's something you're taking an initiative, a proactive initiative.
Yeah, you know, wheels roll slowly, but they're moving forward.
Sure, well, I mean, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? So
Yeah.
there's interest, there would be more interest understanding what you have.
Exactly, right, yeah, so I know at last month, I think it was, we have an RDC number here. Oh, we've got, Don can tell you.
Yeah, there were some results still to come back. Mike Berry might have them. I haven't heard from him. So far, the results on the Brickyard have come back really positive. We definitely think we could develop.
Awesome, awesome. That's a good sign.
I was just wondering, when is the second RDA board meeting? You got a date for that yet?
October 12th.
The other thing is, you know, expansion of the TDD boundary. There's things we don't get right the first time around. That's why you have that expansion of it. So.
When you talk about adding new properties, like the downtown Brickyard, we're not subtracting from what they already have in terms of like the equation.
No, so the cap on the first go around is 320 acres. So what we would suggest is, so we're at, it's in 208 or 280. 280, I couldn't read it. So we have about, 30 or 40 acres that we can play with. To try to get in some of these additional sites. That's, I think, part of also the reason that we didn't grab the entire downtown area is you get part of it, but you can't get all of it for that kind of acreage, and same with Brickyard. And so that's why it goes into that second tranche where you expand the boundary to include some of those areas.
I think Rob probably talked to you guys about this already, but wastewater treatment plant is down here in Chesterton.
Right.
Any development that's gonna happen here, we're gonna need sewage upgrades, lift station upgrades.
Yep.
And it all is gonna run along Waverly Road. Can we, as I understand it, we have to have the street and easement on the map in order to include sewage infrastructure upgrade, right?
Or at least the entire complexity of that.
Can we just draw another green line like this, connect it this way, or does it have to shift this line somewhere? Is that feasible, easy within 30 acres-ish?
Like instead of going up 49, go down Waverly.
Well, I'm not saying that I wanna take it, I'm not saying that I wanna move it off of 49, because I don't know the pros and cons of the value of taking that away and replacing it with this, but can we add this?
I mean, that's just a right of way connection.
Yeah,
So right away,
between two
and
properties.
can it go further south than this, or it has to stop here?
It could go further south.
It
Yeah,
can't-
but that's why if you go further south,
It
it
needs to
would have
connect to
to end at something.
end at something.
So like when it goes north, it's ending at the old Johnson Bay.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And we have, trail connections that are moving forward through RDC to connect Hawthorne Park up Waverly.
Mhm.
And then across over to 49, connecting to the visitor center and then up to the state park.
A couple of the questions I think we have to answer are legal questions.
Yeah.
None of us are lawyers. But the question that's in my head is the right of way connection considered part of the TDD? That's what we would have to get answered.
In other words, are you eating up acreage to add that thoroughfare?
We don't add acreage with right of way. But it's not clear to me that right of way is part of the TDD. If there's not acreage added, then how can it be part of the TDD? I mean,
Sure.
so that's a lawyer, that's a legal.
Yeah, if you just, for example, if you just grab the right of way, but you don't grab the property next to it, can you pay for a trail on that property? Yeah.
Right.
Because it's a little different than a TIF, and for the TIF, it could be for the benefit of the TIF. This has to be in the boundary.
Right.
So we'll.
So you gotta let us know.
Yeah.
We'll try to find a, see if we can find an answer. Okay.
Thank you.
Question for you, the part that connects up to Porter Beach, that property up there, is that just for the property of the old Johnson Inn, or is there a larger footprint? Is that just that?
Really good feedback today. Other questions, thoughts? We can hang around if you want to take a look at the boards, happy to answer more questions you might have. Go ahead.
So as you're going through this process, what's the earliest point where someone can make an application for this opportunity on any of those phones?
I'll do that, or do you-
No, I'm looking at you.
Okay. The application has to come through the town. So, the developer would work with the town, and then the town would bring forth.
Which
So
makes
the
perfect
communication
sense.
would, the developer always communicates with the town.
Yep.
The town then communicates to the RDA.
Makes perfect sense. So, but could I make an application for one of those sites, in November 1? And have that process start to be implemented?
The TDD was established.
Yeah, the TDD was established. I mean,
So
the
is it-
incremental
is it
dollars
yet?
are gonna take some time, and that type of stuff.
So it's the application isn't available yet?
No.
Do you foresee when that might be possible?
The way we have 7 TDDs that have been created. They were created last year. We're in the process of kind of getting them going, implementing them, working on the MOUs. So I think it's important to get the MOU in place between the RDA and either the city or the town. So we're in the process of doing that. I would say, maybe give us till the spring. summer of
Well, likely
24,
someone can
or
realize
something
this
like that.
next summer.
Yeah.
So even if they made an application going through the process the city's gonna require anyway, can you start it this winter and then maybe achieve it this summer?
Conceivable, yeah. Thanks everyone for coming tonight. We'll hang around the boards, get more questions. Everything will be available on the website.